to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and welcome to part 4 of our Cure series. Tonight, we are looking at Bloodflowers, The Cure, and 4:30 Dream. I want to welcome Todd Evans from the Contrarians and Rush Band, and Reed Little, who you can also see on the Contrarians. So let's get ready. We're going to look at The Cure. This is going to be great, so let's get going. Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and I want to welcome Todd Evans and Reed Little here tonight. You've seen these gentlemen before. For God's sakes, this is part 4 in our Cure series. This is the one where we wrap it all up. This is it. No more Cure. Well, I can't say that for sure, but
something's coming out this year.
Yeah,
we might have to revive it. We may have to revive it, but that's
I'll
cool.
believe it when I see it.
Well, it's a long time coming. Let's hope it's a good release. That's what I'm hoping for.
They've been playing it. Sounds good to me.
So anyway, gentlemen, how are you tonight? It's been a while. I haven't seen you since last year.
That's true. This is the first video of the year for us, isn't it?
It is.
So, yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, but Davy and Ryan and I did a Beach Boys video. That kind of started the whole thing off, but this is the first that we've all met together. So tonight, we are looking at Bloodflowers, The Cure, and 4:13 Dream. 4:13 Dream was the last thing. That was what, 2008, boys? I think that's
right. Yeah, released 2008. Yep.
I mean, that was the last thing, and of course they're working on something now. Bloodflowers, here's the cover for that. And then here is The Cure, and Todd and I were talking about this before, but I got this for $3 back in 2015. This is one of those, they couldn't sell these. I swear to God. You could pick them up all day back then. Now you don't see them.
That's the deluxe one too.
Yeah, it's got the DVD in it.
Well, by the time you start with a band in 1979, when you get to 2004, it's only the hardcore fans that are left.
The good doctor's here with us tonight. Dr. Funkenstein, how are you?
Bringing the funk.
Nice to see you. Holy crap, look at this. Mr. Jones is here. Have a great show, gentlemen. I'm not familiar with The Cure at all.
Now's the time, Peter.
Now's the time to jump in.
I mean, these are the wrong albums to jump in on, but now is the time.
But now is the time. But I know you've been obsessed with Neil Peart lately, so I'm just going to let it be. But thanks for coming on. I appreciate everybody coming into the chat. Feel free to make comments. You know the routine. This isn't our first live show. Anyway, what we're doing tonight is looking at our top 2 tracks from each of these 3 releases. So this ought to be interesting because I'm not a big fan of any of these records, but I'm going to give it a shot. But Bloodflowers was the 11th studio album, and that was released, actually came out in Japan first on February 2nd of 2000, and then it came out on UK and Europe in February 14th. There were no singles released from it. The record got a lot of mixed reviews. AllMusic gave it a 3-star. Rolling Stone gave it a 2.5. New Music Express gave it a 7. Melody Maker gave it a 1.5.
Melody Maker.
AllMusic. Well, I'm just saying, they're kind of on board with what I'm thinking. Rolling Stone criticized the quality of the composition, saying Smith can write 4 bad songs in a row, and Cure albums tend to leak filler like an attic spilling insulation. Ouch.
Wow.
Considering I don't think Robert Smith ever had any filler prior to Wish or prior to Wild Mood Swings. I don't think there was any filler. Wild Mood Swings, you could argue that there's filler, yes.
And I did.
And that's where the cracks started to form.
I think there's filler on Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, but I'm in the minority.
Oh my God, yes.
But there's something about that record. No, I don't think Kiss Me has filler. There's
highs
something about
are high
that record. The highs are high.
Yeah.
All right, look, I know I'm jumping the gun here a little bit, but before we tackle our favorite songs on these albums, we're gonna fight out The Cure trying to sound like The Cure. All right, Grant, go ahead. I want to hear your piece on why you think The Cure is trying to sound like The Cure and we're going to talk about this.
Like
do I
I
get to do a
said.
rebuttal?
Well, of course, we're both
Okay.
going to rebut.
Okay.
AllMusic noted that although Bloodflowers contain the Cure's musical trademarks, morose lyrics, keening vocals, long running times, the album falls short of the mark, largely because it sounds too self-conscious. This is where they've had too much time in between records. I know everyone needs a break, but I think you started this process on Wild Mood Sings where not all of it sounds like the Cure trying to be the Cure to me. But this record, it sounds like Robert Smith is trying to capture that whole Cure spirit, that tonality. I don't think the songs are all that memorable. We don't have David M. Allen here either, so that hinders the production to me. We've got Robert Smith vocals are way up front on here. There's a lot of acoustic guitar on this record. I don't know. I listened to it and it just sounds like they're trying to be the Cure to me, where they didn't really before. This just sounds forced. This record sounds forced. That's what it sounds like to me.
All right. And I'm definitely going to rebut those points. But Todd, would you like to rebut first, or would you like me to rebut first?
Well, let me go out. It's fresh in my mind. I think that this is a situation that a lot of bands come into when A, they've been around for a long time, and B, it's been a while since you've heard from them. And I think it's just critical over-analysis. And I don't mean for this to be a personal attack against Grant. I certainly don't. But I just know
I don't
that
think that at all.
I just think that, and I'm going to explain why, because I've said this before about another band and another album. I just don't. Me personally, I don't think that a band trying too hard to sound like themselves is meaningful commentary. And I'll tell you why. Because I used to say that about Queen and The Works. I used to say that every song on Queen. I used to say that every song on Queen, The Works, sounded like, there's Crazy Little Thing Called Love Jr. and there's Bohemian Rhapsody Jr. And now that I'm a little older and there's no more Queen, I think that's overly harsh. I don't know how a band like that, like Queen or The Cure, can do what they do and do it for a long time, for decades. And I just don't want to. I just don't feel like being the one who's saying, "Oh, well, you're trying too hard to sound like yourselves." If I were them, I would be trying to sound like myself.
Yeah, but you shouldn't have to try. It should just come naturally.
No, that's one of the things I most disagree with. That is not how the songwriting process works. Every song has to be wrangled to death.
Yeah.
So the unwritten subtext, when you say a band is trying to sound like themselves, you are leaving off the subsequent clause, which is and failing to do so. Otherwise, you wouldn't say they're trying to sound like themselves. You would say it sounds like a previous Cure album.
Well, it doesn't sound like one, but they're trying.
No, it does not. That is my point. It has nothing to do with the sound of previous Cure albums. Now, it's still Robert Smith writing music. So why is Robert Smith going to get crap for writing songs that sound like Robert Smith? What else is he possibly going to write songs that sound like?
I just don't think the songs are as good as what he's written in the past.
You've really got... Already, you have mentioned the elements that make this a different album. Acoustic guitar, prominent acoustic guitar, not an element of previous Cure albums. Prominent piano, not synth, not keyboards, but jazz, Mike Garson in David Bowie style piano. Not Cure at all. Robert Smith's vocals way up front in the mix. You go to a thicker album like Disintegration where it's mixed more like an instrument. So you've got a lot of different things here. I simply am unwilling to accept that all of this was in the service of trying to sound like a previous sound. Now, some bands, I think Accept is a perfect example of a band that was trying to sound like Accept. They produced some albums in the 90s like Death Row, and I don't remember what the other album they produced in the 90s was, that had a very different sound, And then they move into Blood of the Nations and Leningrad and whatever else they've come out with recently, Blind Rage. And they are trying to sound like Accept and succeeding. Black Sabbath 13 was trying to sound like Black Sabbath in the 70s, and I think was terrible because of it, because you were throwing away 40 years of musical growth. To me, these final three Cure albums, they may not be the best Cure albums, depending on your taste. I happen to love Bloodflowers, the other two less. But I don't think that they were trying to sound like anything. I think that's just the music that came out. You're talking about a man. Disintegration was written when Robert Smith was about to turn 30. Bloodflowers was when he was about to turn 40. That's a pretty big milestone. And in the middle of that, they had done these massive tours of the United States. And I think Bloodflowers is the most American sounding Cure album. I think he brings in, okay, somebody put down there was acoustic on the Head on the Door. Yeah, but it was not, I mean, just in my mind, the songs didn't feature the acoustic as much. I'd have to listen to Head on the Door again. I did not listen to it in preparation for this show. But the acoustic sound that they use is very similar to a sound of like Days of the New or Alice in Chains on the Jar of Flies album. There was a time in the late 90s in America where acoustic in hard rock was a thing. And the Cure incorporated that element. And then they brought in, that, like I said, that Mike Garson style piano. And Smith is a huge fan of Bowie, at least up through, I think he says Lodger is the last good Bowie album, or maybe Low. Anyway, he was a big fan of the 70s Bowie, so he brings in that Garson style influence and makes a very American style album. So yeah, I mean, again, where you rank it in terms of other Cure music, fine, but I don't think it's in any way derivative of previous Cure efforts.
Yeah, I just don't like it.
Well, see, there you go. That's a thing.
It's fine, but I never played this record. It's just like work to go through it.
I love it. And one of the things I love about it is after years and years and years of Disintegration being my favorite Cure album, it simply became a chore to listen to. Every song is so long and it takes forever to get going. Brilliant. Even the songs that are only 3 minutes long feel like they're 10 minutes long. Bloodflowers is a much more immediate album. The songs, even the lengthy songs, are structured more conventionally. They're not these epic drones. And I think that makes it a more accessible album. So,
all right. Well, since we're going down this route and looking at it like this, it seems like we're looking at it more as doing an album review so far than we're looking at individual
Should we talk about our favorite tracks now?
Well, I don't know. This might be a better conveation just to look at it as a whole.
No, it was hard for me to pick them. I'm saying them.
Well, go ahead. But all right, real quick, Reed.
Yeah.
What would you rate? We're gonna tally the ratings. We weren't gonna do this, but we're gonna do it on these records. What would you rate this out of 10?
Right now, for me, the Bloodflowers is an 8.
An 8. Okay, we're going to tally this up, and we're going to review this at the end. Okay, so Reed gives it an 8. All right. Todd Evans, let's put it over to you. Well, unless, Reed, you want to go over and talk about your songs that you particularly like.
All right, so my favorite 2 songs on the album, just coincidentally, are the first 2 tracks, Out of This World and Watching Me Fall. So, Watching Me Fall is an 11-minute track, but it doesn't feel like 11 minutes to me. And I think by the time we get to Bloodflowers, there is nobody in the business better than Robert Smith at matching his vocal delivery to the intended emotion of the song. It's not just singing, it's a performance, right? And he does that beautifully on Watching Me Fall. He sings, he has this very low, and then he goes up to, when he gets to the line, I'm watching me scream, he's actually not quite screaming it, but it's nonetheless at a very elevated pitch, and he's pumping a lot more air out. I'm just going to do them both at the same time here. I
That's
love the
fine.
sound of that acoustic guitar. I love the sound of the piano. In Out of This World, there's a little guitar motif that sounds a little like Wicked Game in the background. I love that. You know, Out of This World is not a particularly aggressive track. Pardon me, not a particularly aggressive track, but I think it's a great opener. And I love the guitar tones on actually all three of these last albums. There's a ton of guitar effects. They're drenched in reverb and echo and phasing and flanging and wah-wah. And people always talk about poor old Thompson as being the best guitar player, possibly prior to Reeves Gabrels. I mean, I'm a huge Reeves Gabrels.
Oh, we lost you.
Reed, we can't hear you.
Well, can you
There
hear me
you're
at
back.
all?
Now
you're
you're
back.
back. Now you're back.
Oh, that was weird.
That was weird.
Okay. I was going to say, all right. Did you hear me talking about Reeves Gabrels?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We weren't sure what
so,
you said about him.
Well, I love Reeves Gabrels, and I think he's the best musician in the band, but they have yet to put out an album he's played on, so you can't fairly judge him. But I will say, I don't think that Perry Beaumonte is a name that comes up often when you talk about The Cure. People talk about poor old Thompson and what an awesome guitarist poor old Thompson is, and a texturalist. And I'm like, man, I love Perry Beaumonte's playing on Bloodflowers and The Cure. I think he's fantastic. And he played on Wish and Wild Mood Swings too, right?
Yeah, and then you also have to consider how much playing is this guy, because you don't really know.
Exactly.
You don't really know. You can't tell.
Well, based on some of their history, you know, I think those little parts like that Wicked Game part, maybe that's Robert Smith, but I have no way of knowing.
No.
I've never seen an analysis of it, but regardless, I like the way that they play together on this album. I think they sound great. I think the guitar tones are awesome, and I love the songs.
Okay. Well, okay then. All right. Well, Todd Evans, let's throw it over to you. I'm really looking forward to see what you have to say.
Well, I was today years old when I found out that this album got mixed reviews. I didn't know that. I thought that it was well reviewed. I apparently have lost that part of my memory. But when we did the Contrarians show where we picked our 3 favorite Cure albums, this was my number 3, and I got some grief about it. And but I like the atmosphere of this album. I think it's interesting that it has a lot of acoustic guitar on it, yet it's a pretty dark album. I like that it only has 9 songs, because I also think that even though Disintegration is a masterpiece, I think it's a little too long. But I normally, and another thing about this album, it does not have anything on it like the worst tracks that were on Wild Mood Swings, things like Club America and stuff like that. There's not anything that sounds like they're trying to be Flavor of the Month. You know, that sounds like they're trying to be Sugar Ray or whatever else was happening at this time.
Sugar Ray. So, that's the first time Sugar Ray has been mentioned on this channel.
and hopefully the last.
Hopefully the last.
Now, I have talked about how much I love Watching Me Fall before, and I thought I was going to pick it, but I revisited this album and spent the better part of a day with it, and I got to the point where I was really having trouble picking 2 songs that I thought were my favorites, because I really like all of them. So the songs that I picked are The Last Day of Summer and 39. The Last Day of Summer is absolutely gorgeous. I love everything about it. I love the keyboards. I love the piano. I love the guitar solo. There's 2 guitar solos in it, but they're not really guitar solos. They're almost introductions of counter melodies. And I think that most of this album is that way, and that's why I like it so much. But I think that especially Last Day of Summer is just a masterclass on counterpoint and counter melodies. You know, here's a melody. Oh, here's one that goes with it. Oh, here's another one that goes with it. And I love that kind of songwriting, so that's why I chose that one. 39 I just love because it's got that big it's got that big bass thing happening at the beginning, and I absolutely love that. Every once in a while, there is a great there's and on a Cure album there'll be a song like that where it's definitely a showcase of the bass playing, and that's one of the things that I like about it. And I think that 39 has kind of a Fascination Street vibe to it. Things that got really close to being picked for me were Watching Me Fall and the title track, and There Is No If. But I like the whole album. It was really funny. When it came out, I thought maybe Someday was going to be the single because it felt like maybe that was the one song out of the batch that they could have pulled for one. But I guess they ended up not pulling one at all. But do you want me to rate this on a 1 to 10 scale?
I do, because I mean, now it's become, we're picking out tracks, but now we're doing whole reviews and we're going through it fast.
Yeah.
Because it's already 21 minutes in. So yes.
9. I give it a 9 out of 10.
Holy
Wow.
mackerel.
I like the album. I think it's beautiful.
All right. Well,
I'm with you, Todd. I didn't give you any abuse on that show.
I
may have given you abuse.
I wish I could rally. Maybe
It was more after the show came out, but
I never pay attention to that.
Maybe I'm kind of going with what all the other reviews said. Melody Maker said it was goth awful. 1.5 out of 5. I don't think it's that bad, but I'm not the only one that doesn't think that this album's up to par. It just can't be me, but maybe I'm at fault because I like what came before. And maybe this is just such a departure that I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I just don't think that the tunes are there. And what tunes that I did pick for my choices, both of you picked already. I went with Out of This World. I mentioned that, yes, it's got acoustic guitar on there. I think there's a good song in there somewhere. I don't know. It almost sounds like a lot of these songs to me need to be fleshed out more. I don't know. But then I also picked The Last Day of Summer, and I think that could have been on Disintegration. It's very Disintegration-like, and I don't think it's that far off from what went before. Now, that could be me wanting more Disintegration. The Monkees like everything the same. Hey, let's make the same album over and over again. And I could be at fault for that. But Disintegration was such a masterpiece that nothing else could ever, match that greatness. And maybe that's my fault that I can't rise above it. I don't know. John Lennon said you're only 25 once. They said, he wrote his best stuff in 1965. John Lennon said, well, I'm only 25 once. The Cure at this point, they had their peak. You can't maintain that all the time. And, Wish is almost as good as Disintegration, but it's a little bit of a departure. Wild Mood Swings, obviously the cracks are really there, and I think the cracks continue. I don't know.
Yeah. No, and I want to say I am not in any way disparaging the fact that people enjoy earlier albums. I mean, I think that's absolutely fine. I just don't like the narrative that they were then attempting to recapture that, because I do not hear that anywhere in here.
I hear it on here like the Queen did with The Works. I like The Works, but it just feels like they're trying to, since they screwed up with the Hot Space so badly, they're like rushing to come back and see if they can pull it back together to get that U.S. market. I don't know.
What are you giving that out of 10?
Me?
Yeah. Come on, you gotta. You made us.
I would give it I would probably give it a 5 out of 10.
Oh, I think you were gonna say lower. That was peer pressure pushing it up to a 5.
No. But I'm gonna do an average.
I'll take it.
All right. So one other thing before we move on, if you look at that album cover down there in the corner, I think these last 3 albums have terrible album covers. I think The Cure often had horrible album covers, and that looks just like Edward Furlong.
I like this one okay.
It looks like Edward Furlong from Terminator 2 dressed up as an evil clown.
Someone got a hold of InDesign or PageMaker and mastered it in like an hour. This is what it looks like.
But
Okay,
it's better than The Cure or 413 Dream.
Yeah.
I don't think 413 Dream's all right. No,
You,
I don't
you
know.
think that's all right?
It's no, I don't like any of it. All right, so Reed gave it an 8. Reed gave it an 8. Zeb gave it a 6.5. Todd gave it a 9. Ernesto gave it a 6.5. And I gave it a 5. And that gives it a ta-da, a 6 point. I'm going to go with a 6.6.
Okay.
I can accept a 6.6. This is probably the lowest rated album so far in the catalog. Though a lot of people don't like the top, but I don't have any problems with the top. The Good
I dig the
Doctor
top.
gave it a 7. And then the Nightmares of the Cure from 2000. Well, we're hitting that one. Of course, I prefer the European version, but it always irritates me that there were 3 main versions of it. Well, I've got, like Zab, the one I've got's the US version with the DVD, and I got this for $3. They were giving these things away back in the day.
You know, and I feel bad dissing on the album cover because I think it's like his niece or nephew or something, like a refrigerator drawing that they put on there.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, kid, but it looks exactly like what it is. And for a band of the profile of The Cure, your home art was not appropriate for the album cover.
I used to draw Ultraman when I was that age, and I would not put any of those drawings
Ultraman.
on an album cover. So
Ultraman.
I freaking love Ultraman.
God, I haven't heard anything from Ultraman in years. All right, so I've included the Good Doctor's rating, which he gave it a 7, so that gives us a 6.6.
All right, then.
So, all right, gentlemen, let's go to the next record. Oh my goodness, let me get my notes up so I don't screw up any more than I have. All right, so now we're looking at The Cure, which is the 12th studio album, released June 2004 by Geffen. The album was entirely produced by American producer Ross Robinson and spawned the hit single The End of the World. And I do remember that video to that. And what's it like, Robert Smith out in the yard with clothes and the storm. I don't know. I haven't seen it for years, but I thought it was good.
I never saw it.
And like we just mentioned, the album cover was designed by his Smith's nephews and nieces. The reception of this record was generally positive. Metacritic calculated and weighted the average score given to The Cure at 75 out of 100. AllMusic gave it 3 stars. Rolling Stone gave it 4 stars. They liked it much better than Bloodflowers, and I know it's Rolling Stone. Guardian gave it 4 stars. Entertainment Weekly gave it a B. So overall, this record got a much favorable review.
What about those Philistines at the Melody Maker? Do you have their review?
No Melody Maker, no. New Musical Express gave it an 8 out of 10.
Ooh, the Enemy, yeah.
Well, I think this record sounds more like a Cure record to me. I don't know. I don't know if the songwriting's quite up there, but it sounded more like an old friend to me. But I want to see what you have to say, Reed. Let's throw it over to you.
Okay. Right off the bat, I don't like this album as much as Bloodflowers. And I think, now I'm projecting, it's not up to me to tell people what they like or don't like.
Right.
But on this album, the piano that I loved on Bloodflowers is gone. There is still acoustic guitar, but it's mixed way, way back. It's no longer part of the primary sonic palette. Mm-hmm. So those 2 elements make it a more traditional Cure sounding album if you just talk about the sonic palette being used to create the music. But I miss those things. I loved the tonality of that acoustic guitar and the piano, and I miss them. So I don't like this album quite as much. Now, occasionally, when doing preparation for these shows, especially, I look at the Wikipedia listings for albums, and the Wikipedia album for this one says it's generally considered heavy Cure. And I thought, those people are smoking crack. This album's no heavier than Bloodflowers. It's no heavier than Disintegration or Pornography. I mean, it is not a particularly heavy album. There are at least 5 songs that I don't think are heavy at all, including one that's just a straight up ballad. So I don't get the narrative that gets attached to these albums. I just don't hear that, which is why I joined the Contrarians back in the day, because I don't jump into the mainstream and agree with those opinions right off. But I have a much harder time with this album. And now I have to say right up front, this is not something that is going to apply to most of humanity. But I have harped on in other shows, I have some neurological issues. One of those is I have chronic migraines. And this freaking album triggers migraine headaches. It is literally the hardest Cure album to listen to. There are a couple of songs, I don't know what frequencies that they're applying, but it's just got this noise. It attacks my nervous system, and I can't listen to it. And so because of that, I'm not inclined to give it a favorable review, because it causes me literal pain. That's not metaphorical. it's literal pain. Right. So, but that said, on the times I can listen to it, I actually like the first track, Lost. I like it because it is very different. It is, at least as best I can remember. Now we're talking about a band with 13 albums in their catalog, plus multiple albums worth of B-sides and extra tracks. So I do not have a clear recollection of every track the Cure ever recorded. But this is the most dissonant track that I can think of in the Cure's catalog. It is just a sonic assault from the very start. And on the one hand, that's irritating as hell. But on the other hand, it provides a musical tension to go with Smith's lyric about personal disorientation. And I can say that it has a very real disorienting effect on my poor crippled nervous system. So job well done, Robert. My other favorite song is The Promise. I love The Promise because it's epic and dark. It's got layers and layers and layers of guitar. And again, I'll say it, these 3 last albums have so much guitar effects, way more guitar effects than I think they used under their previous producer, and I'm forgetting the man's name. But clearly in the 21st century, when they started making albums, the producers they were using brought in some very different equipment. So my only real complaint with this song, and it comes up often on this album and some on the next, the vocals are actually drowned out by the layers and layers of guitar. And you just can't hear what he's singing at points. And this is where I preferred Bloodflowers, with the lyrics that were way up front and you could hear the vocals so much easier.
Okay. What would you, well.
So, and on days I can listen to it, this is my 6.5.
6.5. Okay. Well, I just want to throw out George Marino at Sterling Sound mastered this. But don't forget, what's this, 2004? Everything's all brick walled at this point, Zeb. Everything is cranked up. There's no dynamic range at this point. Right. So it fits right in with everything else that's out there. Todd Evans.
Okay.
What you got?
Before I go any further, I want to say, when I was talking about the bass part in 39, I wanted to give Simon Gallup credit, but my brain stopped working. I couldn't remember his name. But anyway, okay, so The Cure. I don't like this album. When it came out, before it came out, I heard that Ross Robinson was going to produce it. And he's the guy who's worked with bands like Korn, Limp Bizkit, Slipknot, Glassjaw, the Blood Brothers. And I heard that and I was angry. I was just like, he's going to ruin it. And I think he did. I think this is a terrible sounding album. it's got I'm not surprised that Reed says what he says about it triggering migraines. I don't know anything about that, but it's got a horrible snare drum sound. I mean, it's just this really unsatisfying thud. And another thing about it is that I'm just going to tell you what I don't like about it right off the bat. Roger O'Donnell is credited as being a keyboardist, but I only hear him on one song. I don't know whether his stuff is buried or whether they just mixed it out. Since I just said such mean things about Ross Robinson, I will say that in the wiki article they do mention that he was upset that Robert Smith took 5 songs off of the album and replaced them with other songs, and apparently they were very dark, depressing songs, and that Ross Robinson was not happy with the version that came out because he thought that the dark, depressing songs should have been on there, and I agree with him. I think they should have. I think that might be where the most interesting stuff is. So I used to really like Lost. I didn't pick it. And my 58-year-old 2023 ears didn't care for Lost at all. And I used to really like it. I just feel like the whole I can't find myself over and over again. I used to think that was really cool and really angsty, and it just didn't work for me anymore. That may be fair or unfair, but I ended up choosing, and this is where I'm going to say something good about this album. I ended up choosing Before 3 and Taking Off, and I'll tell you why I chose those two. I chose Before 3 because Before 3 has been, since it came out, in my top 10 Cure songs. I think the chord progression in Before 3 is really beautiful. It could use some orchestration. I'm always the guy that says that there should be more keyboards. So in this song, I think that there should have been. But I think it's a really beautiful song. I think it's a really catchy song, and melodically, it's really good. And it stands out on this album as being the one song that I think is really exceptional. And I chose Taking Off because it's the only song where I can hear any keyboard. It's the only song where I can hear Roger O'Donnell, and it's a very kind of a very typical Cure, happy, bouncy keyboard sound, and it's welcome after sitting through a lot of these songs. And I almost picked The Promise. I like The Promise too, so that would be my honorable mention. Would be The Promise, but I used to, when it came out, I liked it more than I do now, but I spent a lot of time with it the past couple of days, and I didn't care for it.
What would you rate it?
I'd give it a 5.5, 5.5.
All right.
But I do want to mention also, it's well, you know what? I'll save that for the next album. There was a transition. There was something that happened in the Cure between this album and the next one, and I'll save it for when we do that one.
Okay, that's fair enough. I've already been on record saying I'm not a big fan of any of these records, but I think this album, yes, it's mastered lousy, but most records are mastered lousy at this point. But I think to me, it doesn't sound like the Cure or trying so hard to sound like the Cure. It seems like a much more natural record. Are the songs there? Would I like to have Dave Allen back in the helm? Yeah, I would. I don't think the songs are quite up to par. Like I said, you can't always, they've already had their peak, Of the songs on here, my two choices are The End of the World, which was the single. I find it a lot more like The Top. Vocals are down in the mix. I'm very comfortable with it. This is what I would expect it to sound like. I know that might be a bad thing because it just sounds like I'm going back in time. Maybe that's my fault, But I like that track. And the other track that I picked was Taking Off. It's pop Cure. And like we've seen on this whole series, I love it when the Cure does pop because that's what I think they really do best. And I think Taking Off I really like that track. it just doesn't sound like a parody to me at this point. And like I said, I wrote on my notes, it's very top like. I find this whole album, it seems like his vocal stylings, everything seems like from that time period. Is it as good as the top? No, and a lot of people don't like the top. I would rank this record, I would give this record a 6. I would rate it higher than Bloodflowers, but not by much. We're not talking 10 like we did with Disintegration and things like that before. So I calculated. Reed gave it a 6.5. Todd gave it a 5.5. Zeb gave it a 6. I gave it a 6. And the good doctor, Dr. Funkenstein, gave it a 6. So altogether comes up to an average of 6. So there you go. We're about in the same boat. Good doctor says, I think so, Grant. My sound guy ears hate the mix way more on this. Well, it does have issues. I think they needed a better producer. I'm with Todd on that. And they could use better songwriting, I think. I don't know. It is what it is. But I could listen to this more than I could Bloodflowers, so I give it a... None of these records are all that great, kids. I'm just saying. They're okay. All right, now let's go to the next one.
All right, 413 Dream.
Well, 413 Dream. Let me get my notes up here if I could find them. Where are they, Grant? Oh, my goodness. I must have got all excited and got rid of them.
All right.
Okay, so 413 Dream. Okay, now we're at the 13th studio album. This was released the 27th of October, 2008. This came out on Geffen. Unlike the previous records, they put out 4 singles from this. The Only One, Freak Show, Sleep When I'm Done, and The Perfect Boy. This originally was supposed to be a 2 LP set or a 2 CD set, but they trimmed it down to just 1 album. Evidently, what did he say? They've recorded 33 songs for this. I mean, I have to applaud him for that. That's great. I'm not sure they were supposed to release a CD after or an LP after with all the additional songs, but I don't know if that ever came out.
It did not.
Okay.
Never did. All right. So Smith co-produced the album with the assistance of Keith Uden. I'm not sure about his work. The reviews for this, AllMusic gave it a 2-star review. Rolling Stone gave it a 3.5. Q gave it a 3. New Musical Express gave it an 8 out of 10. Entertainment Weekly gave it a B. So, I mean, we're still on. Metacritic gave it a 69 out of 100. So
nice.
We're still... I mean, we're not really improving a whole hell of a lot, but I'd say we're getting a little bit better reviews. Based on that, let's go to Reed. Reed, what do you think?
Okay, so lots of weird stuff apparently happened before 413 Dream came out. And now, I have not done a ton of reading. I was not reading magazine articles or interviews with Robert Smith. But as a fan looking at it from the outside, this is where it really seems like Robert Smith goes off the deep end, recording 33 tracks and then only putting out an album with how many tracks does 413 Dream have on it?
13.
13. So he's throwing away 20 songs. He never puts out his follow-up album, despite hyping it for a while. And then since then, he talks about, oh, we've recorded music. Oh, we're not putting anything out. Oh, we've recorded music. Oh, we're not putting anything out. He's kind of like John Sykes now. Oh, we've had this album done. It's been recorded. You know,
John
it's just
Sykes
sitting there waiting to go out. We'll even play songs from it so you don't think we're just completely making it up. So as far as I can tell, the only thing keeping that album from coming out is Robert Smith. What else could possibly be holding it back? Right? Because it's clearly, I mean, look at that freaking album cover. It's not that they can't get album art. That's not the reason that they haven't been releasing it.
I mean, they could have worked a little harder on it, I guess.
Talk about migraine inducing. That's just
It's
terrible.
not that far off from Wish.
Yeah, I'm not fond of the album art on Wish either. Anyway, now I do think it's interesting if you look at the career path of The Cure. They're somewhat known for following Robert Smith's wild mood swings, and therefore they do a dark album followed by a popular album, followed by a dark album, followed by a popular album, followed by Wish, which is both dark and poppy on the same album, and then doing dark albums. Well, in this case, he did 2 dark albums in a row because both Bloodflowers and The Cure are pretty dark albums.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really funny that he's like, oh, they left off 5 really dark songs. I'm like, my God, man, the songs on the album are pretty dark. You know, it's not like they replaced them with 5 happy, like, you know, Baby Shark style songs. They're pretty dark. But then you get to 413 Dream, and actually it's the happy album. Sort
It's
of.
happier. It's happier.
The tone of the songs, the music is more upbeat, the tempos are higher, the tonality is higher. The lyrics are typical Robert Smith lyrics. So the music and the lyrics don't always match up on this album, but it is definitely easier on the ears than The Cure. One of those songs, Sleep When I'm Dead, I read that they actually wrote that back in 1985. It had been kicking around since 1985 and finally made it on an album. And you kind of wonder, why did they have to go with a 23-year-old track as opposed to one of the 20 songs that they threw away and never released, right? So, you know, perhaps Robert Smith was doing the wise thing by not releasing the follow-up album, and what we got were the best songs. Generally, I like it. Once again, I'm missing my acoustic and piano. The guy who I was just talking about, Belmonte is gone. Sorry, Mr. Belmonte. I hate to mispronounce your name. Porl Thompson is back. Harry Belmonte. Yeah, Porl is back. And they no longer have an official keyboard player. So they've had some sonic differences. New producer comes in, and they produce what is, to me, a decent and yet pretty forgettable album. I don't. 413 Dream does not assault my nervous system the way that The Cure does. I enjoy it while I'm listening to it, and as soon as it stops playing, I forget what I was listening to and move on to the next thing. It leaves no impression with me whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So I'm always kind of unsure of how to rate music like that. Is it good because I like it while it's playing? Is it not good because it is not memorable to me in any way? The 2 tracks that I chose are Hungry Ghost and the final track, It's Over. So Hungry Ghost is a happy, upbeat song about the never-ending hole of rampant commercialism, which I think is, in a way, it's good because Robert Smith is exploring new material. And in a way, he wrote this song in 2007, and he's only now coming to grips with the idea of rampant commercialism. Did that not exist any time in the past 30 years, Robert? But fine, I'm glad to see you exploring some new territory. Once again, it's not necessarily a dark song, right? Because, I mean, commercialism isn't the same as drugs, loss, and suicide. So it's just a questioning of the capitalist values. Fine, it's all good. We'll move on. And then I like the very last track, It's Over. And for me, this is more of a Robert Smith performance to where he's got, now here we're back in typical Smith territory for the lyrics. We're talking about drugs. We're talking about sex. We're talking about his abandonment issues. For a man who's been married since he was a teenager, or at least with the same girl since he was a teenager, he has more freaking abandonment issues. That is a deep-seated problem there, sir. But he's got this manic lyric, mm-hmm. which his singing style, again, Smith is very good at matching his singing style to the intended feeling of the lyric, not even necessarily with the words are saying, but what they're supposed to make you feel like. So it's very manic and, you know, like this guy's just taking a bunch of methamphetamines or something. And it's okay. Oh, it's a very kind of 70s rock song in a way. It's got a lot of pick slides and, like, you know, big arena rock tricks that you don't normally associate with Cure. It's a pretty fast song, and Smith has been ending his albums with slower tracks for a while. So it's interesting that on this album he adds this really rapid song. Oh, and I like the fact that, pardon me, I have this hair that's landed on my nose and it's just driving me crazy. So if you see me constantly messing with my nose, I apologize.
We'll edit all that out.
I like that the album opens with the little like finger chimes, right? Just like Disintegration. So it gives you a little bit of a callback, but the music isn't particularly like the music on Disintegration at all.
Right.
So I like it well enough. Again, I don't love it. It doesn't leave an impression on me when I'm through listening to it. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to,
Well,
I think I'm going to go 7 because I like
Okay.
it better than The Cure, but I don't like it as much as Bloodflowers.
I'll go with 7. That's cool. That's cool. Thank you, Reed. Appreciate it. Todd Evans. Well, I'm afraid what you're going to say, but
Okay, so I just wanted to say this, and this kind of illustrates the craziness that Smith was taught. Sometimes I think maybe he just needs to zip it as far as talking about what's going to come out when. But he announced that the band would release an album called 414 Scream later that year, which would include 14 outtakes.
Mm-hmm.
And then there would be a limited edition double album called 426 Dream, which also got canceled, which would have had 26 non-album tracks. So, I mean, maybe keep that to yourself if it's not gonna.
Well,
actually
you know
happen.
what probably changed, Todd. You know, they've been putting out all these deluxe editions.
Yeah.
So you know
Right.
what's going to happen. They're going to put out a super deluxe edition of it.
Well, I'd be happy to hear
10
it because
years.
he's been yapping about those extra songs for so long.
Yeah.
But so something happened between The Cure and 413 Dream. And that's that. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but Robert Smith announced that he was going to pull The Cure back to a trio. And he said it was going to be him, Simon Gallup, and Jason Cooper. Mm-hmm. And they actually went on a thing that doesn't exist anymore, Yahoo Music. And they recorded 2 songs live in studio. And one of them, I believe, was 3 from 17 Seconds. And I don't remember what the other one was, but a very similar stripped down kind of track from the early years. And I was just completely pissed off when I heard that he was going to do that. And until I saw those videos, and they were actually quite good. And that was what was supposed to come out instead of 413 Dream, was an album of them as a trio with no keyboards and just the 3 of them, the only guitarist being Robert Smith himself. Yeah. And that is not what happened. Poor old Thompson came back, and they made 413 Dream. They did a tour where poor old Thompson triggered all the keyboard sounds with his guitar, and they didn't have a keyboardist, which was also, I think, gave mixed results. But anyway, that being said, if you search really hard, you can find the video. One of the 2 videos they made that was on Yahoo Music back in the day. But it's like a copy of a copy of a copy. It's like all grainy and weird. But I'm glad they didn't do a trio album. But based on the contents of what they recorded for the internet, it actually sounded pretty good. But back to 413 Dream. Whereas with The Cure, I had trouble finding songs that I liked. There aren't any songs that I'm not going to give it a glowing review, and it certainly is not a 10 out of 10 album. And it is forgettable, like Reed says. Mm-hmm. But there aren't any songs I don't like.
It's just kind of there in the middle of the road.
While I'm listening to it, I actually enjoy it. And I actually had a hard time picking the songs that I was going to pick. But I chose Underneath the Stars for my first one because I think it's really beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I don't think when they made The Cure, they tried to make a pretty song. And I think that's one of the things that doesn't sit well with me. And Underneath the Stars is a really pretty song. and I like all the jingly bells, and it's just sonically, it's got a lot of interesting, beautiful things happening in it. And I also chose The Hungry Ghost. I think The Hungry Ghost is a great Cure pop song. And I almost chose Sleep When I'm Dead. I almost chose The Scream. I almost chose It's Over. I like all those songs. So I guess I would I'd probably give this album a 7.
Okay. That's fair. You liked you liked it better than The Cure. I'll give you that.
I did.
What does everybody think
do.
about the mastering? And I'm throwing that out to the Good Doctor and Ernesto and Zeb. This was
I think it's much better.
This was mastered by Bernie Grunman, so it shouldn't be all jacked up. By Brian Gardner, and Brian Gardner is a good mastering engineer. So I'm just curious what everybody thinks. But Reed, the sound on this didn't bother you.
It doesn't hurt me. So I think it's a big thumb up.
Okay. To be honest, this album and the previous album, I'm kind of like the rest of you gentlemen. I kind of think that it's an okay. The Good Doctor says it's mixed well. Yeah, it's a better mix than what came before. So, okay, Good Doctor's going to give it a 7. All right, I'm going to compile this in a minute. I'm like you guys. I don't see anything really on this record that is offensive, or it's just kind of lays there. Nothing particularly sticks out. I did pick 2 tracks. I picked the only one, and then I go back to that whole pop music Cure. I think it's a great track, and I love when the Cure do pop. I repeat myself all the time, and I picked Underneath the Stars, which I thought's very Disintegration-esque, kinda. It's in that genre, and I love that type of Cure. But then again, it's not. It's I don't find this album much different than what came before, but it is middle of the road. It doesn't seem to offend.
Grant, while we're on that topic, if I can say really quick, I feel like Underneath the Stars is very similar to Want on Wild Mood Swings. The album doesn't live up to it. It starts with a bang, and then you don't really get more of that.
Yeah, like I said when our last show, Want is like one of my favorite Cure songs of all time. When you put that album on, you're thinking, holy crap, game on.
I mean, you get a solid album with, I don't think, any clunkers.
I don't think there are any clunkers, but I don't think there's anything on here that's, well, Underneath the Stars is pretty damn good. I'll give you that. But do I like it better than the previous album? Well, they're about the same to me. I'm going to give it a 6.5 because it is a bit better. The mastering's better. The mix is better. The songwriting's better, but it's still not the glory days. And then I've got The Good Doctor at a 7. So let's see what we've got.
When you've been a band for 40 years, I think it's unrealistic to expect brilliance. There may still be the occasional brilliant thing that comes out, but if after 40 years you're just maintaining, that's probably about the most that you can hope for. Unless you're bringing in new creative blood. That's why they need to inject new members from time to time.
Well, and the thing is, the Cure going back into the studio, I'm not sure what the motivation is behind it, because obviously they didn't feel that they needed to produce an album. You hear Paul Stanley do interviews, and they ask him, "Oh, when's the next Kiss album come out?" And Paul Stanley goes, "We're not going to put out another Kiss album. We're done. No one wants new material." I don't know why
his fault.
What?
I said that's his fault that nobody wants new Kiss. If they had been continually producing albums like every year and a half, and they were worth listening to, people would be happy to buy them.
But still, a lot of these people back in the day want to hear Disintegration. They want to hit Head on the Door. They want to hear all those classic Cure albums.
I do want to say, if you haven't done this yet, go to YouTube and search The Cure Live 2022 and listen to those new songs. They have been very well received. and they are very dark and they are very emotional. There's one where Robert Smith cries and has trouble getting through it, and Simon Gallup has to pat him on the shoulder. The songs are good. The new songs are really good.
Yeah.
The buzz is positive.
Do we have a release date for that?
No,
I don't know. I should have looked it up. It is
there is not one.
Okay.
It is 2023 and it has a name.
Well, when it comes out, we will look at it. And
We
finish
absolutely
the series
will.
on that record.
Oh, and I wanted to mention too that Perry Beaumonte is in the touring, the Cure touring unit for this past tour, and which I guess is probably still continuing at some point as a keyboardist. So they have two keyboards. They have
excellent.
Yeah. So
So on our ratings, gentlemen, we've got Reed with a 7, Zeb with a 7, Ernesto gave it a 6.0, I think. Wait a minute. No, a 6. I rewrote. Yeah. Okay. Reed a 7, Zeb a 7, Ernesto's a 6. Todd gave it a 7. I gave it a 6.5, and the good doctor gave it a 7. That gives us a average of a 6.75. So this album fits right in between Bloodflowers and The Cure. So Bloodflowers got a 7, The Cure got a 6, and this got a 6.75. So they're all kind of in that middle ground.
Thank you, Zeb. Songs from the Lost World. Is that the name of the album? I think that sounds familiar. I think that's right.
Who knows? Now, I did think it was very interesting that when they inducted The Cure into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, unlike so many bands where current members get completely overlooked, like they didn't want to include Steve Morse for Deep Purple, they included Reeves Gabrels in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for The Cure, and he's never even been on an album. So
the Rock Hall, there's no rhyme or reason for anything. I don't think that wouldn't make sense at all.
No. Well, leaving Steve Morse out for Deep Purple didn't make any sense.
Look how long Steve Morse has been in the band. He's been in the band for what?
More than 20 years.
Yeah.
More than 20
years.
Yeah.
Well, until he's out now.
Well, yeah, but come on, give the guy been longer than,
vastly longer than Richie Blackmore was.
Exactly. In the band. So there you go. All right. Well, there you go. We have it. We gave our songs. We gave Bloodflowers a 7, The Cure a 6, and 413 Dream a 6.75. So, all right. I guess that wraps it up. We did it in an hour, boys.
All right. That's a lot of Cure.
That's a lot of Cure. I try to keep it moving along. But I want to thank everybody that appeared in the chat. Ernesto, the good doctor, Zeb. Holy crap. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for leaving a comment. And I want to thank my guests, Todd Evans and Reed Little. So this series isn't done, but it's done. When that new Cure album comes out, if we will reconvene and we will finish it with that. So on behalf of everybody, I want to wish everybody a good night. And there's more stuff coming up this week. Tomorrow's April Wine, the Queen episode on Ryan's channel. Todd and I have Matthew's Suite on Thursday, and Big Star is on Friday, and that's with Davy and Ryan. So a whole bunch of stuff. In fact, I am just booked solid the rest of the month. So,
right. And this configuration will be back for more Goth Classics at the end of the month.
That's right. We're doing Sisters of Mercy on January 31st at 6 p.m. We'll probably do that one live, and we do have a special guest.
Ooh, a special guest.
I know the special guest.
Love the mystery.
There is a special guest. It's going to be great.
Awesome.
So, so please tune in. More good stuff coming. So I want to wish everybody a good night, and till the next time.
All right. Thanks, Grant.
Hey, you got it.